we thought we'd start with one of the pro-democracy ballot initiatives. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because they'll do a better job. They know what their background is and might fill us in that respect. But I believe you are the co-authors of this ballot proposal. So, you know, if there's any sort of disinformation or misinformation campaign going out up there, we're going to be able to hear it right straight from the source tonight as to what this ballot initiative is going to be about. And this is Jan BenDor, and she is from the Michigan Right to Vote campaign.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us the honor of appearing at your first in-person meeting in 2 years. It really is a great pleasure to see real people and not little squares. And I'm Jan BenDor, and we're going to get our PowerPoint up in a minute or two. Here it comes. And I'm here with Fred Green, who is our policy director for My Right to Vote. Fred and I have both been at this for a very long time. I've been the statewide coordinator for the Michigan Election Reform Alliance since we formed it in 2006. And one of our top goals, in fact, our very top goal, was to have a right to vote in Michigan. It's not in our state constitution, and I'll take all of your astonished looks. Everybody thinks it's there. It's not. There is no fundamental right to vote in the state of Michigan. We have 27 enumerated basic rights, including the right to carry a gun, and we have the right to have stem cell research, but there's no mention of the right to vote. And if you want to be even more disillusioned, you can look at the United States Constitution, which also doesn't have an explicit right to vote anywhere. You've got various amendments, the 15th Amendment, which said, your right to, your voting cannot be abrogated because of your previous condition of servitude or race and so forth. But it doesn't actually say you have a fundamental right to vote. Nor do any of the other amendments, which were all written in the same negative way. So in 2000, when we had the horrific Bush v. Gore case, the U.S. Supreme Court followed the lead of Antonin Scalia, who said there is no basic right to vote. And Florida didn't have a right to continue their recount. So we've been dealing with this without really knowing what was the source of our pain. We've taken a look at this for a long time and said, well, why is it that we have so much voter suppression going on? How come all of these horrible things that were supposed to be gone with Jim Crow are still happening? It's kind of boils down to we don't have a fundamental right to vote, and because of that, the courts can say, well, it sounds reasonable to me if people have to have only one certain ID to vote, or they might have to come in and prove they aren't being evicted from their house, which is something the GOP tried to do in 2008. You might remember this. They went to people who were in foreclosure and said, you can't vote anymore. And, that was voter intimidation, all right, but it wasn't strictly against any constitution. So Fred and I got to work on this last year, and I'm hoping we're going to get this working soon so you can see all this a little more visually. And we thought, there's got to be a way to finally slam the door on all this. We're sick of this. I don't know about you, but I was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee at the age of 13, and I've been working on this for a really long time, and I'm getting kind of tired of it. And my field director was John Lewis. So he worked on it for a really long time, too. We think we have a solution for Michigan. No other state in the United States has a fundamental right to vote in their Constitution. And we read them all. We know. They have lots of nice words like elections will have to be fair and open. And elections should be free and equal. That's not really what we need. And every one of these states, it's kind of scary how many of them make sure you have a right to have a gun. So gun rights are way more protected than the right to vote, which is part of the insanity that we've been dealing with in this country. I'd be interested to know of the folks here, how many people here have worked on a petition campaign of some kind? All right, great. You are pros, and you are in possession of skills that are much needed. I started in Michigan petitions in 1976 with the bottle deposit law. Did anybody else here work on that? You know, that was pioneering. Brian McKenzie and his colleagues organized that. Brian is a resident of Oakland County, retired judge. And there have been many since then. I worked on a death with dignity proposal in 1998. Anybody else work on that? That was, it unfortunately lost to the Catholic Church, which mobilized about $30 million to defeat it. But it was a valiant effort. Since then, we've had quite a few efforts. In 2011, we had an effort to recall Governor Snyder after he started off his governorship very badly. We actually collected 500,000 signatures, but that wasn't enough because to recall a governor, you have to have 1,000,001. And then we hit the big time. We were able to collect enough signatures on a referendum campaign to get rid of the emergency manager law. The emergency manager law was a horrible thing that said any community that basically the treasury director and the governor thinks is insolvent, we're just going to take you over. And all of your elected officials are no longer in power. Talk about anti-democracy. And funny thing, all but one of the communities that were taken over were African American majority communities. So Flint, Detroit, guess what happened? Well, we decided to repeal that law. And we had enough signatures. We had to fight through many court battles to get it on the ballot. The voters voted to repeal that law. And, well, what did the state government, the state legislature do? This was 2012. Anybody remember what happened after that? Well, the legislature decided they would, in the lame duck, pass an identical law and just reinstate it. And you would think, well, isn't that against the Constitution? Can they really do that? Apparently so. And so we were back under emergency managers. So even a vote of the people, a resounding vote of the people, could not take out one of the worst pieces of legislation in our state's history. And as a result, we had the people of Flint get poisoned. We had Detroit people being shut off from water. We had both governments totally taken over. Flint was forced to drop its Detroit water contract and join a contract for a brand new water source, which was a Wall Street fiasco. Bad things happen when voters are disconnected from their power. Well, what we want to do tonight is introduce you to our two constitutional amendments. Both of them focused on closing the loopholes in our Constitution. Our Constitution needs a little repair. And you wonder, well, how come is that? Well, I did a little research in history, and I read the biography, actually it's an autobiography, of our late great Attorney General, Frank Kelly. The People's Attorney, has anybody read that book? Jack Lessenberry co-authored it with him. And I wondered, because I wasn't here in 1962 when they had the Constitutional Convention to rewrite the Michigan Constitution. And I wondered, well, why did they have that convention? What were they trying to accomplish? Turns out it really wasn't from any genuine urge to fix problems in our Constitution. It was because George Romney was running for governor. And as a GM official, he'd never held elective office before, and he needed a platform. And so he got all of these mostly Republican delegates together and had a constitutional convention. And they kind of really wrecked it. The right to vote was still not in there, but they didn't fix that. They did a number of things that made it worse. And then the people of Michigan, not knowing any better, voted to ratify that Constitution in 1963. So you wonder how it got to be that way. It was all because George Romney needed a platform to run for governor. And that's the history there. Frank Kelly was pretty disgusted by the whole thing. And he spent the rest of his career batting down bad legislation that was, he in his Attorney General opinion, said was unconstitutional. And his opinion stood for a long time. We have two proposals. We decided that trying to put everything in one proposal would be really confusing to people. And we had some wonderful advisors. Dr. Robert Sedler, Wayne State University renowned professor of constitutional law. And we had Chris Thomas, retired director of the Michigan Bureau of Elections. And between the two of them, they pretty much know everything you need to know about elections and constitutions. And they were very helpful to us in putting this all together. I brought to the party my own 18 years as a certified accredited election administrator in 2 different jurisdictions. So I've run a lot of elections. And there's a lot in it that isn't in the law books. You have to know how things really work. And you sure don't want to fix anything that's not broken. We have enough problems. So that was our starting point. And we looked at what can we do to plug these holes and loopholes in our Constitution, and how should we go about doing it? And we started drafting, and we invited all kinds of people to help us. Fred and I were both on the policy committee for the redistricting reform. So we had a lot of great colleagues in that group, and some of them were generous in giving us their feedback. We really tried to listen to a lot of people, and we invited a lot of different groups to work with us. So we're pretty pleased with the outcome because it's been vetted a lot. And so I'm going to invite Fred to talk about the first proposal that was at the top of our list, which is getting a fundamental right to vote, an enumerated right to vote in the Constitution, and locking it up from manipulation. Fred, it's all yours.
I'm a great admirer of Ukraine. They are fighting for their survival. And we, not even close to Ukraine, but we are fighting for the survival of democracy. And it's a major, major thing. So, as Jan said, we're trying to close loopholes. You guys are probably familiar with most of them. The most apparent one is like if you're familiar with Secure My Vote, and they're trying to get legislation passed because they're going to get 8% of the people to sign their petitions, take it to the legislature, and the legislature will approve and turn into law what 8% of the people have presented by signatures, and avoid the veto of the governor, and avoid a ballot, the initiative going on the ballot. And that's insane. So Jan's going to talk about the loopholes on that side. I'm going to talk about the loopholes on the right to vote. And if you don't remember anything else, this to me is the heart and soul of our right to vote proposal. You may or may not be familiar with it. The right to vote, the Supreme Court decided in 2007 that while voting is a fundamental right, and you think that, well, if it's a fundamental right, then there'd be a hard time, you would have a hard time trying to restrict voting rights. Not the case. The Supreme Court said, though it's fundamental, if it doesn't severely restrict voting rights, then it's acceptable, and it's reasonable, and it can become law. So we've decided, we're changing the entire legal structure. No other petition is doing what we're doing. We're telling, in the Constitution, we're telling the courts, any change to a vote, to the voting, to any restriction on voting, not just a severe restriction, but any restriction on voting requires that there be a compelling state interest, narrowly tailored to get the desired effect. Yeah, and moreover, we have another part to that, because the court has also said to the legislature, the Constitution empowers you, legislature, to protect the purity of elections and to make sure that the electoral process is not abused. Therefore, if you think that what you're doing with a voting restriction is important to prevent fraud, that's great. You don't have to show fraud. You can just talk about hypothetical fraud, and we're going to trust your judgment as the legislature. Well, we know how that has been abused. All these laws and bills that the legislature has tried to pass, 39 bills, but thank God we have a Democrat as a governor, and she vetoed all of them. But then they came up with their Secure My Vote, and now they're trying to sneak them in through the initiative path. So the other part of our equation, the key to ours that nobody else has, so we got the compelling state interest, that's one hurdle, and we also changed the Constitution to say, if you're going to allege fraud, legislature, you better show substantial, credible evidence of fraud, because otherwise the law will not pass. And that will change the entire landscape. So the other parts of our right to vote proposal are also important. For example, we have in there that we know Secure My Vote is providing that the Secretary of State and can no longer send out applications on an unsolicited basis. We have in ours, yes, she can. The Secretary of State can send out absentee ballot applications on an unsolicited basis. It was successful in 2020. We got more people voting, which I had always thought was the idea of democracy. And now they're trying to stop it. It's crazy. So we're thwarting that. We're saying, and ours will control. The Secure My Vote is a statutory initiative, a law. Ours is constitutional. Ours, I hate to use the word, will trump theirs. So, and we also are, so they have a number of things in the Secure My Vote that we are, I mean, our language alone that I just talked about, the fraud and the compelling state interest, that would stop them. But we also directly, specifically stop them. And I should say that if the legislature goes as crazy as people in Georgia and Arizona and say, you know, we think there was fraud in the election, so the legislature is going to take this away from the people and the legislature is going to vote, no. Again, they have to show compelling state interest and actual fraud. And we all know they've been into court how many times, couldn't show anything. When you have Giuliani representing you, I guess, you know, it's not much. So we also have against Secure My Vote that in order to get an absentee ballot, you don't have to give them a copy of your driver's license, your social security number, and everything else. All you have to do is sign the application and let them match signatures. That's the only thing that, you know, that's what they do. We haven't had problems with it in the past. Why invent it now? And I don't know if you've read, but I read that in Texas they have a similar law, and it actually resulted in 30 to 35% less voting because people just have problems with it. You know, not everybody has their driver's license at their hand or can get it to a copy machine and copy something and send it in. We also say that Secure My Vote says no affidavits anymore because, oh my God, they're fraudulent. Where's the fraud? No, we can't, you know, there's a possibility. So we say in our constitutional amendment, you can vote by showing a driver's license, by matching a signature, or by affidavit. Not changing anything as it is now, but stopping them in their tracks. And you have to carefully read the Secure My Vote. It pretty much says that you can only have a drop box like the 5 days before the election, only to like 5 p.m. from 9 to 5, and then on the day of the election all the way to 8, which is terrific. We're changing that. We're saying, you know, you get a drop box availability 40 days before the election and open till 8 p.m., you know, 9 to 5 until 8 on election day. And we also require that the state be open 2 weekends, either Saturday or Sunday, prior to the election, so people can come in and vote with by absentee ballot. We also know that they're trying to stop us giving donations to election administrators or opening up our churches and synagogues because that makes it too easy to vote for people. So, you know, they're trying to outlaw that Secure My Vote. We specifically say, as long as the donation or in-kind contribution is made with the sole purpose of helping, you know, buy election administration equipment or helping with the election, it's fine. But, you know, they seem to think that the priests are, you know, buying votes, that they're influencing the election by opening their doors. But, you know, the state, by the way, is not giving money to anybody to do anything, so everybody's hard-pressed to afford all the changes. And, you know, with all the great numbers of absentee ballots and voting, it's put a strain on. We need people to be generous and kind and make these donations and in-kind contributions. And finally, what we do is, in order to speed things up, because we know that the allegations of fraud by the right is that, you know, the absentee ballots must be fraudulent because the Donald was winning on the in-person vote, and all of a sudden the absentee ballots came in, and he lost. So, ergo, they're fraudulent. So we're putting in that the Secretary of State should adopt rules pursuant to Administrative Procedure Act to prepare the absentee ballots so that they are ready to be counted when election day starts. So, again, those are all important things, but just remember, the most important thing is we will stop the legislature from imposing restrictions on voting from the get-go because of our constitutional changes to require that anything have a compelling state interest and show substantial and credible fraud. And then I will let Jan talk about our next petition. Thank you very much.
One of the ways in which the GOP is trying to fool you is to make you think that the only way to securely identify a voter is with a photo ID, government issued. That is completely false. Over half of the people who voted in Michigan in 2020 voted by absentee ballot, and their identities were entirely confirmed by matching their signature to a master signature in the qualified voter file. And let me reassure you, the people who work elections, people like my staff, are hawks, and they can figure out if a signature has been forged. It's not really rocket science, but it takes some experience. Not one election worker is trained in how to figure out if your photo ID is forged. And if you don't think it's easy to get a fake one, just ask any 16-year-old who wants to buy beer. They're apparently running over $100 now, but you used to be able to get them for $40. So the signature is considered the gold standard. Ask your banker. That's how they know your check is valid. So this is a great myth that's being perpetrated in order to suppress voting. I now want to talk about our second proposed amendment, which we're calling the Citizen Initiative Reform. And this is to stop some of the other dirty tricks. I've mentioned before the dirty trick where you can just turn around and repass a law that was just voted down by the voters. We've said you can't do that anymore. A law or a constitutional amendment that is approved by voters will stand until those voters change it. And that's that. Boom, door closed. How about the infamous adopt and amend strategy that they've been using? Remember what they did to the citizen initiative to raise the minimum wage in 2014. The legislature adopted it, and then they gutted it. And they said you won't even be able to get $12 an hour until 2030. Well, that was a bust. What about what they did to wolf hunting? The Humane Society, to their amazing credit, collected signatures for a referendum against each of 2 votes that were taken in the legislature to hunt wolves. Each time, they only had 90 days to collect signatures in the middle of winter. And they did it, put it on the ballot, won both of those elections, and what did the legislature do? They came out with another clever end run to make it possible for the Natural Resources Commission to put wolves on the hunting list in defiance of 2 votes of the people of Michigan. Now, you're getting a theme here that we're taking away the power of the people. And by the way, it's in our Constitution that all political power derives from the people. It's in our Constitution, and we got to take that back. So another thing we're going to stop, as we've talked about, is what they're trying to do now with secure the vote. Get enough signatures, shoot it right over to the legislature, pass it in the legislature, boom, it's done, it's a law, the governor can't even veto it. Okay, that's over. All initiatives will go to a vote of the people. None of this sending it to the legislature for a sleepover, which is what they've been doing. We're changing the deadlines, okay? you may not realize it, but up until about 1973, Michigan allowed 4 years to collect enough signatures to get one of these initiatives on the ballot. That was a pretty decent amount of time. It went from one election for governor to the next one. How did that get changed to 180 days? We have the next to shortest time frame of any state that has, of the 16 states that have this capability. Well, it turns out a very annoying citizen was trying to cut the salaries of the legislature in 1973. And they decided to retaliate by giving her only 180 days to do it. That wasn't a very good reason to do that, but it has stood in spite of Attorney General Kelly having ruled it unconstitutional and all kinds of fights in court. So we're going to put this back a bit. We're going to give 2 years, which would put Michigan right in the middle of the pack with the other states that have initiative and referendum. 2 years is pretty decent, and it gets you through 2 winters, which is the hardest part of doing this. And hopefully no more pandemics. All this work is very difficult, and every time you make it harder, you're really making it harder for the people, because the corporations can always afford to spend $3 million and hire circulators, and they'll go out in the middle of winter. But the pens don't work very well in the cold. Fred and I know that very well. We've also lengthened the amount of time for a referendum. Now, here's another dirty trick. The current Constitution says that once a law is passed and you don't like it, you have to collect enough signatures to repeal it in the 90 days or by the end of 90 days from when the session ends. So the session ends in December 31st. You have 90 days to get your signatures in. We're lengthening that to 180 days. So you actually have a little warm weather to do that in, instead of having to hang out in animal shelters like the wolf people did. These are some of the horrible things. The other thing that the Constitution does, which it makes no sense to me, I don't know what they were thinking in '62, but they provided that if a bad bill, the bill you want to get rid of, has an appropriation attached to it of money, it cannot be subject to a referendum. Well, the schemers looked at that and said, oh, well, that's easy. We just put an appropriation on all our bills. And that's what they've been doing, to referendum-proof bad legislation, special interest, whatever it is. That's got to go. So these are the key things that we're doing to make sure that the power of the people is restored to those of us who live here and love our state. What can you do to help? We really need help. This is a huge undertaking. Each of these 2 amendments needs to be turned in on petitions bearing 425,000 valid signatures. That's a lot. And it went up quite a bit because we had such a great turnout in 2018. So now it's a really high bar. We would like to encourage you to become circulators, since you're all so experienced. You don't have to go out right now in the cold. You can circulate to your friends, your family, members of your clubs, other groups that you're active in. It will be very easy if everybody just did 2 or 3 petitions times 2. We would get there. We need you to help us. Go to our website, This is myrighttovote.com, and you can get there with your cell phone. There's the code. And you can donate. You can sign up to do whatever it is that you're comfortable doing. We need people to be hubs to hold petitions for other people to come and pick them up and sign them out. We need people to call and thank people who are working, thank our donors. We've had some wonderful donors. In about a month, we're going to need people to help us with validating the petition signatures, which is something you can do at home, right from your computer. So these are things that you can help us with. And we've got a sign-up sheet over there if you'd rather sign up with a pen and not on your computer, but you can go to our website and sign up either way. We're really excited that we've got so many people who are committed and willing to do this. You don't have to go to Ukraine to fight autocracy. You can do it right here at home. I think we're going to take questions.
We have one question on the Zoom call. They said these petitions won't impact the 2022 election year, correct? This is the 2024 election year when changes may occur. My understanding from Benson is there will be no change for voting this year, but I may have misunderstood.
That's right. Fortunately, the Republicans Secure the Vote won't have any change either this year. So everything stays the same, but we really got to pass these things in November if we're going to have it in place. Now, with the constitutional amendment, it goes into effect 45 days after the November election. So the amendments would be in place in January. But some of the other things, different timing. So, but it's as fast as we've been able to do it. We spent all last year working on this and trying to get allies and build a coalition. And this is, we know we should have done it earlier. We've been trying for years, but now we finally, I think this is the moment.
So, I think it was in 2018, where the petitions had to have some number of votes from each county or something, or precinct or something weird. And what happened with that? Is that?
Yeah, that was the legislature's attempt to scuttle the passage of Proposal 3, which needed elaboration in legislation.
Yeah. I was going to say, they tried to say that you had to get no more than 15% of the signatures from each county. And luckily, the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court said, you know what, that's unconstitutional. Nice try. Yeah.
That was horrifying.
Yeah.
They did a bunch of things like that. Fortunately, we were well defended by our great Attorney General, as well as the courts.
So you mentioned, polling places and how they're not funded correctly and the equipment and everything. Why don't we just go to mail-in or absentee voting? It's cheaper, it's more secure. They do it in 7 other states. I know we don't push for that, but it would solve a lot of these problems.
Well, that's a very good question. I work extensively with the national network of election reform activists, and every state has a different structure for their elections, so you can't just take a cookie-cutter solution and make it work everywhere. There are a number of reasons why we can't go to 100% absentee voting. First of all, we've had all these problems with the post office, as you know. Thankfully, our Senator Gary Peters has gotten the Senate to approve his reform bill of the post office, which will hopefully bring it back. When I first started working elections, I would rarely have absentee ballots arrive after the election. I would get ballots from a person living 6 miles from my office in about a day or a day and a half. And when I retired, it was taking 2 weeks. Many more of them were late. So now hopefully we can get the post office fixed. That's one big barrier. Many states, including Michigan, we helped in 2020 to get over 1,000 drop boxes set up so that local governments had other ways that people could leave their ballots securely. And that worked really well, especially for Detroit. Detroit had 0 drop boxes for 450,000 voters. And by the time we finished, they had 35, which was a good start. You know, rec centers and other community facilities. How did people get their ballot back? In Colorado, you know, they get in their pickup truck and drive it in. Well, that kind of defeats the idea of convenience. So every state has to come up with their own solution. I think the problem with polling places is it's getting really hard to find places. I used to just go beg. I found a wonderful Islamic center that was willing to host one of my polling places, but they had built it without compliance with the ADA. And we can't have polling places anymore that aren't completely accessible. So I had to decline their offer, which was really sad because it was a beautiful building, but it wasn't compliant.
Yeah, I just want to say that we also have in our amendment that there's going to be you have to have at least one drop box for every 15,000 voters in your jurisdiction. So they can't outlaw the drop boxes. They'll be in the Constitution. They have to have them. And like in Detroit, probably 25 to 35. But you are right. I just think absentee ballots are going to be eventually 90% of the vote. It's so convenient that the no reason absentee ballot is terrific. And I think it's going to go that way.
Well, it was already more than 50% in 2020. So it was a winner, not just because of COVID. I think people are thinking, you know, I really like having more time to figure out what I'm doing here with my vote. You know, we used to have people who would come to the polling place and they'd get their ballot and they would call the hubby. What were we going to vote on this? You know? So it's difficult. There are often as many as 100 decisions you have to make on a ballot. You need more than the 20 minutes that you usually get.
Yeah, we have one more question from the Zoom call from Brenda. She said, would it be wise for us to team up with Promote the Vote petitioners to tag team and double resources?
What a great idea. We thought of that about a year ago, but we haven't been able to make it happen. Most of the volunteer circulators for Promote the Vote are actually voters, not politicians people. But it isn't their proposal. They weren't involved in developing it. And we do have, I think, a lot of people that are going to help with both of these. These are all very different proposals. They don't really conflict. Some people think they're conflicting. They're not. So I think we should all get together and join forces. We need to cover the state very thoroughly so we can get enough signatures to qualify.
I just wanted to add that, you know, I recently sent a letter to the head of the ACLU of Michigan and said, you know, yes, we do have 2 proposals on the right to vote, but we also have our petition to end the loopholes. I said, everybody's got to be in favor of that, and we need to do it now. Let's unite and both fight for that. And I still haven't heard back. And one more thing I heard today, and this will probably be news to Jan. I was talking, I heard through the grapevine about voters, not politicians. And I was talking to somebody and I said, well, just take our proposal and their proposal, if you like theirs better or whatever, and hold 2 clipboards. You know, I've done that in the past. He said, nope, there was a call where voters, not politicians specifically said 1 clipboard. And I have a good friend who was on that call and he said, but I've got something that's special for to fight to fight truth in sentencing and other things. Can I hold that one? No. You hold ours, and that's it. It's not like they see the big picture. We're all on the same team. We all want democracy. We all want to end the loopholes. We want to, I can't even believe that they're not going to hold the one for reproductive freedom for all. I said, but that's ACLU of Michigan also. No, one clipboard. It's astounding and it's sad. We tried so hard to get together to have one right to vote proposal. Spent an entire year knocking on the door, but for some reason, it didn't happen. And we tried until the very last minute, till January 20th, and it didn't work.
And that was kind of our deadline, because if you wait beyond that time, you're not going to get through all the hoops you have to go through with the State Board of Canvassers. And even with our most timely action, they dragged us out with dotting the I's and crossing the T's. They have to approve your form. And then you may have heard that the Board of Canvassers voted to ban the union logo from, and so some campaigns were forced to go back and reprint all of their petitions at great expense. This is not cheap. You've got more than one page because the rules make you print every possible word that you might be influencing, whether a change of statute or a change of constitution. And so instead of one sheet, 2 sides, you've got to have a giant folio page that gets printed and then folded. These are arcane rules, but it's very costly. And I don't know if some of the groups are going to survive this because they don't have that much money. And we were there when this happened. The 2 Republicans on the Board of State Canvassers had figured out this brilliant way to screw up all the Democratic petitions. If the 2 Democrats had voted against this, nobody would have gotten out of the room with approval to circulate.
A 2-2 tie kills it. You need a majority.
Right. So they had us hostages. So we decided to consult our printer, who's a union printer, and they agreed to go forward, but as long as they could put their logo on the instructions to circulators that are going with the petition. So we're kind of working around it. But I think this has gone all the way up to the AFL-CIO, and it will be taken up in court. This is anti-union, unfair labor practice stuff. We're going to be over here inviting you to take a quarter sheet with our information and sign up if you would like. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity.